Well, it's a cold morning. I'm going to go out to the shop and work a little bit. I've got my heater on. I turned it on earlier. I'll show you what I've been working on. Putting some boxes together. That's all clamped up there. It's ready. Actually, this is a custom order I'm doing. There's one there, and there's one over here on the floor, all clamped up. And then there's my lathe. I got a bowl going on my lathe. And then there's 3 walnut boxes and 1 more maple. So there's a total of 6 of these boxes with dovetail joints and so forth that I'm working on today. So I'm going to be taking these clamps off, and I'm just going to take this last clamp off of the second box, and we'll be ready to do some sanding. This is a big project. You never can have too many clamps. So as you can see, it takes a goodly supply of different kinds of clamps to work in a shop where you're making multiple items. It's kind of a joke around my house that you can't have too many clamps. So you see the dovetails there on the boxes. Those are done on the bench over here on a dovetail jig. Let's move this belt sander. I'll show you that. There's the dovetail jig that I use to make the dovetails. Does a good job, makes a nice tight dovetail joint. There's a sample of one that's just rough, and of course I use the router with the guide bushing and the dovetail bit. I use a carbide bit. So what we're going to be doing now with these boxes that I just took the clamps off of, you can see that the edges overhang a bit there. So they're going to need to be sanded. I always like to leave a little waste material when I clamp the top or bottom on the box, so that I can sand it down flush and it looks real nice. So we'll start the sanding process. I use these little round sanding pads. I like to put those under the box, so that when I do the sanding, I don't scar the undersurface of the box from the vibrations of the sander. I use a random orbital sander. This is a Festool 5-inch sander, and a variety of grits. I actually start off here with a 40 grit to kind of take the material off quickly. That's you see, it's going to have to come off there. So I've installed the rough grit pad on the sander, and we're just going to start the process of off that material. It's much easier and quicker to do that with a flush cut router bit, so we'll be taking that away. On some of the boxes, the material left over there is a little too thick to sand away because it's just a tedious process. So I've installed a flush cut bit into my router, and I'm going to be just trimming that excess away. Now I'm continuing the sanding process. I've sanded with the rough paper, and now I've replaced that with a 120 grit pad, and we'll be sanding the box on all sides with the 120 grit pad, and then we'll be doing this other box as well, and then we'll have all 6 of our boxes completed, put together, and sanded. Okay, well, we've got all 6 of the boxes sanded down now, and there's 3 that are made out of walnut, and 3 that are made out of maple, and we're going to be cutting the lids on these. And the way I do that is on my table saw, and I'll rig that up, and then I'll show you how we're going to cut those lids on all 6 boxes at the same time to make them all uniform. So I added a tall board to my table saw fence so that I would have a steady interface there with my box. And I set my table saw blade at the depth of the thickness of the box so that when I cut through the lid, I'll be just barely clearing through the thickness of the box. And now I'm going to measure over to see how far I want to cut the lid. Well, basically, I'm going to want to cut the lid about 2 inches, but I also want to cut it, if I cut it 2 inches, it'll be in the middle of this style right here, or this dovetail, which will make the box nice and crisp. So I want to center my cut right there on that dovetail. So I'll go ahead and make that measurement. Looks like it's going to be about 2 1/16, but I'll check that, and then I'll set my fence so that the blade will enter right here at 2 1/16 inch, so that when the lid is cut, it will be in the middle of a pin and not off to the side. It makes it look a lot nicer. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start making my cuts now. So as you can see now, I've cut the lid on the 2 sides first, the long sides, and now I'm going to complete the cut through on each side. In order to do that, though, it's important that I stabilize the kerf, the width of that kerf on each side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some thin strips of wood and slide in that are perfectly fit to that cut, and then I'll clamp those, and I'll show you that setup here in just a second before I make the last 2 cuts. So I think you can see that I've filled the 2 kerfs on each side with the thin strip of wood, and now I'm preparing to saw the other 2 sides. This will keep the top stabilized so that there won't be any wiggling of the top as it comes loose, and that'll keep it stabilized so that it won't, my saw blade won't make any errant cuts as I'm cutting the finishing of the top with the last 2 cuts. This is very important, otherwise your top won't fit properly. So Don't skip this step. Now I made one of the cuts on the short side. I still have I've moved my clamps up now, and the kerf piece is still in place, and now I'm going to make the final cut at the top so that it's even all the way around and it'll fit nice and snug against the top against the bottom. Okay, top is cut. Now I'll just take the clamps off. Take the kerf pieces out. And there's my top. Here is my bottom. That's how you cut a nice top off of your box. Now the next part in this process is I'm going to round over the edge of the top and bottom of the box. I'll start with the top. You see this is the inside of the box here, and I'm going to use a router table with a guide bushing round over bit. And I'll be rounding this this over half-inch round over there, so that it will get a nice curve on the top edges of the box. I'm going to leave the dovetails square because we don't round those over, but we will round over the top and bottom edge of the box. See if I can let you watch this process. So there you see the top. That's edges have been rounded and sanded them a little bit. So now the top is cut and rounded, and then we're going to be rounding the bottom edge as well on the box. This makes a nice little chest look when you do that. Looks like a little chest. So I'll show you that after it's after the bottom gets rounded on. The next thing we're going to do is cut the lid 2.5 inches from the back edge, because I want to hinge the lid on top and not on the back. So I want to cut through the lid, and then I will glue that short piece back onto the box. I'll show you that in a minute. So I've set my blade just above the edge of the lid so that I can cut all the way through it. And now we'll make the cut. So there you see the lid that's been cut, and in order to make this work properly, we'll be installing a thin kerf like we used earlier. We'll be installing a thin kerf permanently in this area. We'll glue that on so that our lid then will be tight and flush on the box. And that'll be our last step before final sanding. So now I've glued and clamped the cut off piece of the lid back onto the main body of the box. And fits very nicely. And then I have cut and clamped a small kerf piece to replace that kerf that was cut by the saw blade, so that the front of the box will flush up when I put the top lid back on. And that's real important that you put that piece in. I've left it a little proud on top right here. That way I can take a sander and sand it down flush, and you won't even really see it. All you'll see there is a different grain on the face of that. Instead of a side grain on that, you'll see a face grain on that, which is really kind of nice. So we'll let that set up, and then we'll install the rest of the lid. While our first box is setting up, the glue setting up on the top, then I went ahead and made all my cuts on the other boxes, the two side cuts. I just went ahead and did those on all the other 5, and the 3 walnuts there. So now I have the side cuts done, and I'll be doing the end cuts, and before I do each one, I'll replace the kerf with a thin strip and clamp just like I did before. So here's the box with the clamps off of it now, and I'm doing the final sanding on it, and you see the pieces are glued back on that I cut off, and then I glued the strips in so that when you add the top, which is here, and you add it on, you want it to fit true, which means when you put it on like that, you want the front to be flush. But you can see there that it is perfect. So we'll put the hinges on the top and the clasps on, and then we'll be ready to start the finishing process. So I've got a couple now of the maple boxes finished sanded down and the hardware installed. Thought you might like to see them. I'll show you. I'm using a hasp type closer, and I made a little stick to leave in the box that will hold the lid up when you want to be in there. And these hasp closers, you know, close down, and then they actually have a key, so you can lock this box. And there's the hinges that I used on the top. So I think it makes a really nice presentation. There's no finish on it yet. I'll probably use a fruit wood stain and a little bit of finish wax is what I'm planning on doing on these. So, but they turned out real nice. I have one more maple to do, and then 3 of the walnut, same configuration. But that's basically the construction process, and the next step will be finishing them out. So I'll get back with you when we get to that part. Okay, here's one of the finished boxes, sanded down in walnut. It's got the hinges attached, and now it's time to put on the finishing touches. So the first thing I want to do is I want to put my brand on box, I have this branding iron, and I'm going to apply that here to the corner of the box. Show you how that works. Put it right in this corner. Just hold it there for a little bit. Usually about 10-15 seconds does the trick. Let's see what we've got. There we go. Handcrafted by Herb Ingram Woodworking. Well, the first thing we got to do when we're going to finish our box is take the hardware off. So we'll do that. Take these hinges off. I like to put the hinges on before I finish it. That way, after the finish has been applied, they're just real easy to put back on. Take those off. There we go. Set them over to the side. And then we'll begin the finishing with the lid. Take the lid. I like to use an air blower and blow the dust off down in the little crevice. Now the finish I'm going to be applying today is a Danish oil. I use a Watco Danish oil, and I've selected a light walnut finish. So that's what I'll be using. And just apply that with a paper towel. So can open there, put some of the finish on the paper towel, and we'll begin to apply this Danish oil finish. Put a generous coat on, and I'll show you what that does to the grain here. Put a generous coat on, and then you let it sit for about 30 minutes, and you come back and put another coat on. You'll see how that really makes the grain pop out on this walnut. See how pretty that is? So I'll apply this generously to the whole box, and then I'll get back with you. So now I've applied the finish generously to the entire box. You can see the bottom of the box there. Some really pretty grain pattern. The dovetails really come out nice. I put a second coat on, and the entire box has been oiled down and let soak. Now I will take a rag and wipe off the excess, and then we'll be ready to put on the finishing wax. Okay, so now I have the 3 walnut boxes all oiled and re-oiled and rubbed down, so they have the oil finish on them. And I'm going to be applying a wax. There's the other 2 over here. And I'm going to be applying a finishing wax to all 3 boxes. And I'll be using a brie wax. Keep it over here in my wax and finish cabinet. Using a brie wax clear as the finish on these. So here we have the finished box with the Danish oil and 2 coats of the brie wax, which gives it a nice soft glow, very smooth. And then the inside of the box rich color of walnut. Love the color of walnut. So there you have it. And that's how I make a keepsake box.